Mike Barley, Chief Public Affairs Officer for a company called Pace-O-Matic. Mike, just what does this company do?
Sure. We're the leading developer of skill games, not only in Pennsylvania, but around the nation. And a skill game, I'm sure many people, what is a skill game? And it's a game that requires the player to actually engage with the machine and play a game to win. It's not a difference between a slot machine and a skill game is on a slot machine, there's a pre-programmed algorithm that determines whether you win or lose based on whatever that code says. Our game doesn't have that. You have to be able to win 105% of the time, or 100% of the time. Our game allows a player to win 105% of the time, every time. And that's been proven in court, and that's the basis for our game. Now, certain players are more skillful than others, and that's how you get winners and losers. But that's the basic genesis of what Pace-O-Matic does. And really, when it gets down to the core of what our business is, we like to think that we bring fun and entertainment to businesses as a supplemental revenue generator.
Now, Mike, describe for our viewers what a game device that would be made by Pace-O-Matic and is considered a skill game, what would it look like? My understanding is, at a glance, it looks like a slot machine.
Well, there's certainly a look of a similarity in the way the design is, but you'll see our games, they'll be marketed as Pennsylvania skill games. We identify every game terminal we have. There's some games that are just black boxes. Our games have, hopefully a familiar wrap around it that says Pennsylvania skill with the Constitution. So you'll see those in different establishments, bars, restaurants, fraternal clubs, and convenience stores.
Can there be any restrictions on where these games are found?
Well, that's really the argument we're having, or the debate we're having in Harrisburg right now, I think, is to try to put some guardrails around where the games are. Right now, you can find them probably in places that I think the general public would not agree that they should be. And that's not, look, we try to monitor where our games are going and keep track of them, ensure they're not in those type of positions. For example, you'll see a lot of these strip mall casinos where someone will rent a piece of real estate and then just fill it with, honestly, illegal games. They'll masquerade as skill games. That's the type of things that the regulation would help to fix. And really, I think if there's one thing I think there's general consensus on when you look at this legislation is to make sure that those places don't exist.
So approximately how many skill game machines are in Pennsylvania? And that's going to prove to be very important as we continue our discussion.
Sure. I mean, it's a moving target. I can tell you that we have 21,000 skill games in Pennsylvania at Pace-O-Matic. I don't know.
There are other manufacturers that have their games too.
Correct. And then you have, you have games that I think get lumped in with us and called skill games. But honestly, they've been the legal games that have probably been around for decades that are in that market space. And I think there's got to be there's never really been enforcement in that realm. And I think this would help to bring that out and enforce it. And obviously, there'd be a tax benefit.
Now, let's expand on a point you made a couple minutes ago about the courts designating these games as skill games. So this is part of a formal ruling. So can you tell me, how did they arrive at the designation of skill games? In other words, try to describe for me the input from the player that constitutes skill.
Sure. I mean, so the standard in Pennsylvania is a game needs to be a predominant skill factor, which means that the outcome is predominantly based on the skill of the player.
You have to make choices, is the way I see skill.
Correct. And you're offered multiple different scenarios, and you have a time frame that you have to answer fill out the puzzle. And the higher the prize, the quicker the time goes. And again, we have players that are very, very good at this. But the difference the court saw was, again, that a player has that ability to win every single time. When it really came down to it, when we had several trials in many different counties and then a unanimous Commonwealth Court ruling, was that ultimately the player has the control of the game. There's no hidden algorithm. There's no math that says this player wins this time, this player doesn't win. And really what that means, a compensating algorithm, means that the machine has taken in enough money to be able to award this prize. And it's, that's a pretty standard with slot machines and VGTs. They have massive computer systems that run these. And again, it's a different model. But for us, with looking at the existing law, we fit into the existing law as a legal product.
Now, again, as far as the court's concerned and trying to concentrate on that ruling, the payout then, is, according to the court, is not dictated solely by chance. So I think you just explained that. Now, why is that important to separate a skill game from for example, a slot machine?
Well, I think the difference is in the law.
Why is it important, Mike?
Sure. The why it's important is skill games are legal under current law. Chance games, as we know, back I think it was 2005-06 when they enacted the casino law, they had to be legalized. There had to be an action taken by the legislature to allow those products to operate.
Now, as far as any laws are concerned, is there a law that applies to the manufacture of these games?
Well, there isn't right now, and that's something that we're working with the legislature and the administration to try to codify and get some basic regulation and rules placed. Now, for us at Pace-O-Matic, it's something that we've done. We've worked with multiple states and jurisdictions to stand up regulation, including Wyoming, at one point Virginia, and then the District of Columbia. And that's what we're working on accomplishing here.
So just how important are these games to the establishments that have them?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. It really is. And there's a reason we've been able to be successful. And that's really due to the Pennsylvania small businesses and those fraternal clubs. You know, if you look through our history here, we went through COVID, which was an incredibly difficult time for many of these businesses. These games help them get through that time by providing supplemental revenue that to help them weather that storm, and then whether it was inflation. So most of our locations, you're looking at 3 or 4 terminals. That helps them pay the rent for the year. So you can imagine when you're operating on tight margins, that can make a big difference. For fraternal clubs, the VFWs, American Legions, I like to say it gets them back to doing what they want to do, which is deliver donations and help charitable donations around the community, whether it's sponsoring a Little League team, helping with the parades for the local 4th of July, the fireworks for the local 4th of July, those type of things that they traditionally have been doing, but due to declining membership and dues, they haven't been able to participate as much in.
I understand some establishments that have these games refer to them as a lifeline. Now, that seems to be almost an overstatement, but are you getting reports to that effect, that without skill games, a certain establishment, maybe a pizza joint, will close?
Yeah, I mean, that's a struggle, and it's something that I think we have to be very mindful of as we get to the regulatory, and in particular the taxation portion of the whatever we work on getting a final product in Harrisburg will be with regard to skill, because we can't, we've seen examples where over-regulation, over-taxation, particularly in this market, can harm these businesses, and also what it can do is really just depress the entire industry. It can make it so that they don't even bother using it because it's too onerous.
Well, Mike, what we're working our way up to is the governor's proposed budget, and it includes a proposal about putting a tax on skill games. So tell us, what is your basic understanding of what the governor wants to do?
Yeah, we've been working with the administration for quite some time, actually previous administration.
Is that so? Pace-O-Matic's been working directly with the governor's office?
Yes. Now, look, we agree that there should be taxation and regulation. That's something we've been proponents of. What that looks like at the end of the day, we're not completely in agreement with. The tax rate, we believe, is very high. Last year, he proposed 42%. This year, it's 52%. But I do believe there's an openness in the administration with the working with the legislature to come to an agreement that would be a fair tax rate, for understanding that this is a different model than casinos. In fact, I think if there's a casino game, we hear a lot about tax parity. It gets brought up quite a bit when I'm in Harrisburg. The closest product to our skill game, despite what it looks like, it looks like a slot machine, is really a table game where a player plays poker. They're involved, they have to play, and that tax rate's at 16%. So, look, there's legislators that are proposing that. I think we need to get closer. We need to find a middle ground it's closer to that lower number. And again, I think we've seen examples throughout Pennsylvania history. I was involved in one, the Small Games of Chance. We did that in, I think, 2013. It was supposed to bring in tens of millions of dollars annually. Since 2013, I think they just eclipsed the $10 million mark because of overtaxation and overregulation.
Well, now that you mention it, Mike, the governor says that he expects Pennsylvania will get $8 billion in revenue over 5 years. What do you think of that figure?
Look, I'd have to see where it's tough without knowing all the attributes of the regulation to understand how they arrived at that number. So without that, it's really difficult for me to say.
Well, here's an argument that the governor has made. He says that skill games currently are taking money away from lottery sales, which benefit seniors. How do you feel about that?
Well, we certainly applaud what the lottery does, but I will tell you, we haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that shows that we've taken any revenue from the lottery. In fact, the study I believe he was citing, we've had to write to know to get that information, and we were successful in getting that information. We're trying to. They don't give you in the most user-friendly format, if I could tell you. But look, from what we can gather, and we have a former head of economics at Villanova looking over this. He believes that in many parts of the state, from what he can decipher, and again, we have some questions out, we've actually helped the lottery because people play the lottery, they play our games, and the money just goes from one to the other.
And both the lottery and skill games can be found under the same roof, can't they?
Absolutely. And, look, that's something that, again, I think there's some talk that they would like that to be part of a solution, and we're certainly open to that. We have no issue with that.
Now, this next question goes back to a point we were talking about a few minutes ago, which is the number of machines. So is the governor interested in further limiting the number of these machines? Well, right now they're not limited at all, are they?
No, and look, I think there needs to be limitations placed. I think the question's going to be on, whether we look at Pennsylvania government in general is not typically good at taking things away from people when they have them. And if you have a small business, for example, a pizza store that has 2 machines in it, and would they qualify under this? I don't know what the former regulation is, but they might not. How do you take them away from that business if that could mean the difference between them closing or staying open? So those are difficult decisions for a lawmaker in their district to make. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. But look, when it comes down to it, there's plenty of low-hanging fruit. Again, you have these slots, halls, basically, that pop up in a strip mall, and sometimes they have 20, 30, even 50 games in there. Those need to go. Has
the governor expressed anything explicit about restricting these places that are set up in strip malls?
We haven't seen anything yet, but I feel like if there's something consensus on this issue, that's one of them.
Now, some lawmakers have their eye on taxing skill games because they want to fund SEPTA, which is the Philadelphia Transit Agency. And what's your reaction to hearing that discussion going on?
Look, we've been very clear. We believe that we can provide additional revenue that's going to help Pennsylvania. I've been around this building long enough to know that it's not my job to appropriate the money, and I trust the legislature will do that, and I'm sure that's going to be a discussion. I think, Larry, that when things happen in Harrisburg, the budget seems to be a seminal pivot point for things like this to get accomplished, and I imagine this will be a discussion that happens during that period of time.
Mike, let's say this 52% tax rate of Governor Shapiro's becomes the law. Let's just say, what will happen to skill game operators if that is implemented?
It's going to be a drastic change for them, and to the point where it may actually, I believe.
Will they turn off machines, get rid of them?
Look, it very well may result in that. I think what you're going to see is some businesses will end up having to close because this supplemental revenue, not just, again, helping to keep the lights on, but also paying employees. Many of these small businesses, you see them. You have owner-operators that are working extended hours because they can't find help or helps, and wages aren't almost an issue. It's really just trying to find somebody to take the job. So these games have made a difference. And again, even when it comes back to the labor issue, which is an important one, it's not just about the wage anymore. A lot of these businesses are offering 401k programs, benefits now for positions to try to get good quality employees that'll stay.
Now let's talk more about business at Pace-O-Matic in general. Some people watching this program may assume that Pace-O-Matic is based in Pennsylvania, but that's not the case. So I'm guessing if it's not in Pennsylvania, maybe you do business with several states?
We do.
Are there skill games all over the country?
They're not. It depends on the state's law. We're in about 10 markets now. So we
10 markets meaning 10 states?
10 states and the District of Columbia. Yeah, so we're, but I would say as far as Pennsylvania, most of our manufacturing is done in Pennsylvania right now. It's in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So those terminals can be found in every one of those states in the District of Columbia, as I mentioned. So we do have we have a very Pennsylvania-centric, a lot of roots here.
So the finished machine is coming off a line in Pennsylvania?
Many of them, yes.
I thought you were just developing the software, but it goes right to the finished thing. So it sounds like.
We develop the software, and then our manufacturing partner here.
I see. And is Pace-O-Matic having similar issues with other states? Let's not talk about Pennsylvania for a minute. Is this debate coming up in other states at the same time?
It is, and it's, again, it's a debate we've been waiting to have. I think a lot of states through COVID and then stimulus, they had additional revenues. A lot of states are looking for additional revenue right now, and this issue's popped up in plenty of states that are contemplating expansions into gaming, or and then obviously the small business aspect of this is appealing to many lawmakers.
Again, the governor wants 52% as the tax rate on skill games. So what are other lawmakers saying? Often when a number comes up that somebody feels is too high, all of a sudden other numbers are floated out there as well. And can you tell us which lawmakers are backing a tax rate that you can get behind?
Yeah, I mean, look, I let other lawmakers speak for themselves and where they're at with the tax rate, but I would say that, Senator Gene Yaw has been a supporter. Again, the games are, many of them are manufactured in his district.
Exactly, right.
Representative Danilo Burgos from Philadelphia has a very large constituency of store owners who operate our games, has been very supportive, and they support like a 16% tax rate. There is. Do
you think that has a chance, Mike? Because that's considerably lower than 52.
Well, I believe that you look at the fact that, again, the most applicable game to our game would be the table games. So I believe it does have a chance. And all.
You said they're taxed at 12%?
16.
16.
So that would be again, you want tax parity. That would be tax parity. So. We're gonna keep advancing our conversation and work with our supporters to see where this comes out. Do I think there'll be ultimately a negotiation of some sort? Yes.
Now, as debate continues on this issue, Mike, there are several gambling interests out there that have a stake in this. So that makes me think about public hearings, and I wonder how much traffic is going to be at these public hearings, because it seems inevitable they'll come up. Who do you expect to hear from, in other words? Casinos, for example?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear from the casinos. We've had several public hearings in the past, never to this extent where we're closer to a resolution. And I imagine that'll pick up. But yes, certainly the casinos. I'm sure the lottery will be there.
What about the horse racing industry? You used to hear a lot about that in Pennsylvania. Is that still a strong stakeholder here?
Yeah, the casinos, they certainly depend on revenue from slot machines. Now, we've seen slot machine revenue cannibalized, quite frankly, by online. There's been massive growth in online gaming. So, again, I assume all the stakeholders are in this industry will be involved and have been.
Now, listen to this, Mike. There's an organization, I know you've heard of them, called Pennsylvanians Against Gaming Expansion, and they represent casinos. And they say that the expansion of skill games covers up underage gambling. How do you respond to that?
Well, the Page has one member as their spokesman. But we have several thousand small businesses and fraternal clubs. Look, the issue of underage gaming is a big issue. And it's something that we monitor, and we have a no tolerance policy for. If a business allows someone underage to play, then we remove our games. The biggest deterrent we have is like the lottery. You can't cash a ticket out if you're underage. You have to show an ID that says you're 18.
Now, besides the tax rate, whenever these public hearings really do get geared up, what other issues do you suppose they'll cover? I'm sure that it'll go beyond the tax rate. What else do you anticipate?
Yeah, there's important regulatory considerations to make, like who is the regulator? Is that the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, who has been really antagonistic towards us they've been the ones fighting us, quite honestly, through many of the legal procedures. So it's difficult for us as an industry to look to them to regulate
Why
us.
do you suppose they've been antagonistic?
I think it's very clear that they do the bidding of the casino industry, and that's it's one of those things in government where I think it was set up with all the greatest intentions. I think it was working for many times, but as time's gone on, they've ended up co-opting that organization to really do the bidding of their the industry. And I believe that they were sold a bad bill of goods, that we were illegal, which has been proven every time wrong in the courts.
Now, what is going to happen next, Mike, as far as you can tell, now that the proposal's been made by the governor in his brand new budget to tax these gains at 52%? Who makes the next move? Are we going to hear from lawmakers, or are we going to have hearings? What'll come first?
I believe you're going to hear from lawmakers. I think they're going to get a collection of all the different plans. And then, I don't know exactly what this process is going to look like. We're kind of watching and waiting as well. But I believe the lawmakers will get together some of what they think is a starting point for what regulation should look like. And then I would believe there would be not only hearings, but meetings, stakeholder meetings to try to sort out where we can get to a solution. And ultimately, they have the job of getting to a majority on those votes, which is sometimes difficult.
Now, given the urgency of the governor's brand new budget proposal, how soon do you suppose some legislation will be drafted by lawmakers, something you can have in your hands and you can debate?
Look, it's always an interesting, it's interesting trying to predict what's going to happen.
Is there additional pressure given the governor's budget proposal to do something on this subject?
I think it tracks with the budget, honestly. I think it's one of those issues that's going to track with the budget. So it really depends on where the lawmakers and depending on who you talk to, what they feel, where the budget negotiations going as far as getting on time budget. And nobody ever wants to show their cards, as you know, until you get closer to that deadline. So I can't predict how that's going to work, but it's a big issue. It's going to require a lot of thought and time. It's something that we have been working on behind the scenes for some time. So we'll see.
Now, the Pace-O-Matic machines, as you pointed out earlier, they're in other places besides Pennsylvania. I think you said 10 markets, meaning 10 other states. So I'm guessing, Mike, that you've learned something from the experience in those states as to how Pennsylvania will turn out, or how you want it to turn out.
Yeah, I caution with everybody, with every state is certainly run differently, and they have different just different processes.
What might be working in your favor here in Pennsylvania versus another state?
Well, I think just the fact that we've helped so many businesses and we've been here for so long, that presence has certainly aided us in the past. I mean, there's been efforts by the casino industry to ban us, for instance. Those bills have never even been heard based on the fact that we have such a solid constituency of small business owners, fraternal clubs. And I think that's a huge asset for us here when we talk to lawmakers, is they know. Not only do they know that they have businesses, they know the people who own the businesses. They know the people who run the fraternal organization, and they go, I know that person relies on the revenue from those games, and that's helpful. Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman said skill games is the only revenue stream he's heard of with broad interest. I thought that was the interesting part. Broad interest. How do you interpret that remark? Yeah, look, I think the Senate Majority Leader is correct in saying that there's been so much talk about this issue over the years that they need to get something done.
He makes it sound like it's almost inevitable.
Yeah, look, I think it is inevitable. I think trying to get to that deal and what that looks like is always, is more challenged. And he would, I don't want to speak for him, but I think others who are involved in this would admit that it's been more difficult than it looks. Just from, hey, we're going to regulate and tax skill games. There's a lot of different things at play. But I do agree with him that if you look at the menu of options, this is the one that looks the most attainable.
Does the timing matter, Mike? If it doesn't happen this year, will it just keep coming back until it does?
I think so. Look, we would like to get it done. We've been we've been out there for several years trying to get something.
But we know the legislative process can be slow, of course, by design.
It can. And there's a deliberative process. And as many times as I see states go fast, and sometimes they have to come back and fix it the next time because they got something wrong. I think we do deliberate, and sometimes that's a good thing.
So whenever public hearings get more geared up on this, Mike, in your mind, what are you anticipating? In other words, what are the arguments that you're ready to fight back on?
Look, I think you're going to hear, again, how many games should be out there. You're going to hear, obviously, the tax rate is going to be something that's...
Are you ready to come back with a fixed number of games?
Well, look, I think it's more about where you would have to start is what locations, what entities would be permitted to have them, and then back from there. So, look, we know they're going to be dramatically less than what they have right now, but you don't want to carve people out that are legitimate business owners, in my opinion. You don't want to carve out legitimate business owners. And again, I keep stressing the VFWs, American Legions, the fraternal clubs that are out there.
Yeah, I'd like to know what you're hearing from them, Mike. Recently, after the governor's speech, of course, I mean, that seemed to light a fire under the whole idea. So they're probably getting pretty excited.
Yes. I mean, look, we work with many VFWs, American Legions. In fact, the American Legion post in Harrisburg is one of our really good locations. And they do great things with the revenue they receive, from having neighborhood Easter egg hunts to backpacks for kids when they go back to school. So they're very passionate about the revenue they're making. And it's also, look, these organizations aren't making a ton of money off of cheap draft beers, right? This is a revenue generator for them to help the community like they want to.
I wonder if they're ready to answer the call to participate at public hearings. I know they want to get their views out there.
They very much are, and we're excited to have them. And the small business owners are very passionate as well. But having those folks that served our country and that are still serving our communities is very powerful.
Let's wrap this up, Mike. The governor is proposing 52% tax rate for skill games. What seems reasonable to you?
Again, we're looking at something along the lines of what our sponsors, with sponsors of legislation that looks more supportive of us with 16%. So we're going to have that conversation, and I'm sure there's going to be a compromise eventually.
Mike Barley, Chief Public Affairs Officer for Pace-O-Matic, thank you very much.
Thank you.